So first and foremost, thank you for everybody who joined us. I know we have coaches from the USA Wrestling Band Coaches app. I know we have a couple of my college head coach is on the meeting, a couple of our high school coaches, some youth coaches, club coaches, and then also a couple of my college teammates who are now coaches have popped in. So super grateful that you could join us for this presentation. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Tommy Callahan. I am the head boys varsity wrestling coach at Rancocas Valley Regional High School. It's located in Mount Holly, New Jersey. In my professional life, I am a school counselor and student assistance coordinator at RV Prep. It's our school district's internal alternative school program. So I work strictly and primarily with at-risk youth, grades 9 through 12. And today we are going to be covering health and wellness for athletes and coaches. I'm going to tailor this presentation more for health and wellness for coaches, and then hopefully bring up some more awareness and challenge you on different ways that you can incorporate this to serve your student athletes. The reason why I'm going with this approach is just because the variety of coaches that are joining us, the different dimensions of wellness we may focus on more at a certain age level than others. For example, if you're a grassroots coach, youth coach, the vocational wellness and preparation or ways to explore that with a fifth grader is going to look very different than maybe Coach Galani does with a fifth year senior who is about to graduate from college, right? Um, and then also, I want us to reflect as coaches, right? We're really good at giving advice and leading others and helping others, but how can we self-reflect and examine like what we're doing and how we can take care of ourselves and do better? Because it's very hard for us to serve our athletes if at at our best ability if we're not taking care of ourselves. So I'm going to go through it. By no means am I like an expert. I want to make sure that you don't feel like I'm making you add more things to your plate as coaches, right? Because there's a lot of things that are already on your plate. I'm just really just trying to explore this topic with you, maybe give you a different perspective or some insight that you either haven't thought about or maybe haven't thought about in a while, and then maybe challenge yourself to look into it. And then once we wrap up the presentation, I definitely want to give some time to explore like things that you might do within your program. So I can take some notes and I can always share that out later in the band app or via email, just because I'm not looking to reinvent the wheel, right? I think some of you probably do some really good things in certain different dimensions, right? I'm going to stay away from focusing on the physical, the technical, tactical aspects of wrestling and make it more towards ourselves. But as we go through, I'll try to hit on each, some more than others. And then feel free at any point that if you want to stop and you have a comment or a question, just raise your hand or put something in the chat. I know Coach Clayton said that he is going to be helping me out field some of those questions so I don't miss them. But I want this to be interactive, right? That if you're taking the time out of your day to be here, I want you to get the most out of it, right? So the agenda, right? Today we're going to define the fundamental dimensions of wellness. At the end of this presentation, I have linked some articles from the Ohio State University and some other places. There are just some discrepancies. Some have more, some have less. So I'll let you kind of do a deep dive if that's your thing. We're going to explore each dimension as it's related to coaches, and then how it can be related to your student athletes. And then last but not least, we're just going to reflect, and I'm going to challenge you to kind of this upcoming season or this cycle for your respective program. How can we be more mindful and maybe work on growing and developing outside of just the wrestling technical and tactical aspects? Do we have any questions before we get started? Thumbs up. All right, we're good. All right. So the 8 dimensions of wellness that we're going to focus on today: physical, emotional, social, intellectual, environmental, spiritual, vocational, and financial. All right. For some of you, right, I think this is applicable to all coaches, right? And it might even vary, if you're early on in your coaching career or your work career, right? This could change over time, right? And then there's some of you who may be getting close to retirement where maybe you're focusing on the financial, and then what you're doing after, right? So these are going to be the primarily the 8 dimensions that I focus on for this presentation at hand. All right. So before we begin, all right, wellness is more than health. All right. I'm not just talking about physical health. It's holistic and multidimensional. It has a lot of layers. It's like an onion. And it's also fluid. It changes over time due to your personal circumstances or the age of your athletes. All dimensions need attention. However, um, they don't always have to be equal, right? At different parts of your life, you may focus more on your physical or your mental or your social. I think of like high school age athletes, right? Compared to, college graduates might start thinking more of their vocational and financial and maybe spiritual, right? So they are going to change with age, time, and situation, right? I can think if you were healthy and then you get in an accident, right? Maybe your perspective shifts and you kind of focus on different aspects of awareness, right? If you get anything from this presentation, right, I'm not going to be trying to give you a lot of stats and data and numbers, right? Just increase awareness, some knowledge, and maybe reaffirm your commitment to like taking care of yourselves and ways that you can best serve your student athletes in the future. All right. So first, physical wellness, just healthy lifestyles and habits, making sure that we are not only discussing them with our athletes, but also living them and modeling them for our student athletes, right? Talking about diet and nutrition, but not only during season, right? But like life, like why is it important to eat and maintain a healthy diet, right? Not only for the weight cuts and the weight management for competitions, but like this is important when you are done competing, right? Living a healthy lifestyle and eating the right way and training, right, is important for the your duration of your life, not only when you're competing. Because at some point, whether it's at 18, at 22, or at 34, like your competitive years will end, right? But we have the whole lifespan in which we need to take care of ourselves and stressing the importance of like these are not something you just do in wrestling, but also in life. Rest and recovery. This is probably where my athletes and myself struggle the most, right? I'm usually go, 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 and trying to pour so much into our athletes that we need to make sure that we're taking time to rest, recover, and refill our gas tank. Especially during the grind of the season, right? I've seen a couple articles through the USA Wrestling Band app of talking like coaches burnout, or you see the emails about officials and us not having as many officials as we once were. Like, I think the longevity, because we're not taking care of ourselves, can be impacted how long we can stay in the profession. So making sure we rest, recover, and take care of ourselves. Fitness, exercise, and training. A lot of you are, professionals. So I think I'm going to say that most of the coaches are knowledgeable about exercise training, the technical tactical stuff, right? But also talking about like what does that look like when you're done competing, right? And finding different things that they enjoy outside of just wrestling, right? You have to have hobbies, whether it's pickleball or volleyball or golf, something that you can do when you're 20 or you're 30 or you're 40, right? And still be active without the wear and tear of drilling, live wrestling, sprints, those kind of things. Talking about risky behaviors and have setting clear expectations with your athletes about the dangers of drugs and alcohol and risk taking behavior, right? And how can we commit to um, just living a life where we are minimizing some behaviors that can hurt us in the now and then in the future. Hygiene, I would say wrestling coaches are great with this, right? The importance of taking care of our bodies, right? Showering after practice, right? But also, just making sure that for some of your younger athletes, especially, that they know why it's as important to, cut your nails and shave your face and wash your hair and do those primary things, because a lot of the times, coaches also serve as role models if there is a void or a gap at home, right? So sometimes we think they know this information where they may not really hear it as often, right? So making sure that we take the time to talk about why this was important. And then medical, right? Being prepared for the future, right? Injury and illness happen, right? At any age, right? Whether you're an athlete or a coach, right? So making sure that we're taking care of ourselves in order to avoid kind of any injuries or illnesses that will hurt us in the long run. Good on physical health. I think this is probably where wrestling coaches are the most competent because it aligns directly with coaching. All right. So emotional wellness. All right. Identifying, expressing, and managing feelings. Um, Super important that we model that for our student athletes and also help, our athletes, whether they're youth athletes, middle school, high school, manage and express them in an appropriate way, both inside of the wrestling room and outside of the wrestling room. A lot of time, I know myself, we set clear expectations for sportsmanship and why it's important, but also like, hey, it's all right to be angry, right? The emotions is valid. However, it's not okay on some of the actions you do when you're angry, right? Being able to manage that and how do you get through that? And some of that is, some trial and error, but also some of that comes from, directly modeling. Like, am I picking up a chair and throwing it across the gym if I lose a dual meet? Probably not, right? I kind of have to manage that myself, and then they'll look at me on how I react and engage it from there. Experience and expression of emotions. I think we do this a lot in a wrestling room, and I think it's great practice for life. Like we put them in situations where we expect them to be like, hey, you're down by a point with 30 seconds left, right? Opponent stalling. How are you going to problem solve? But I think we also have to talk about like when you are frustrated or when you are sad or when you like, how can you deal with that? And who are the people you go to? Because you can't just pick up someone and double leg them. And when you're angry, at your, as a school counselor or as a PE teacher, right, you're going to have to kind of manage those. Self esteem and self concept. I think just building up your student athletes is extremely important, right? I think the world is full of critics, and we tend to find ways on what needs to get fixed rather than what we're good at. So not only focusing on, the areas of growth, but also like letting them recognize, like, hey, you are good at these things, right? And taking the time to highlight what they're good at in addition to the areas where we need to fix. I think, the 3+1, like 3 positive to 1 constructive, right, is a great message, but also like what we feed into them. And not only when they're competing or attaching it to like what they do on a wrestling mat, but like making sure we take the time that they're seen for like who they are as people and what you enjoy about being around them as just a human being rather than just like, hey, you're really good at a high crotch, or you're really tough on top, right? But like, I try to strive that like to tell one of my kids like, hey, you really bring like some humor and levity in situations that I love when you're around because you kind of everybody's all stressed and high strung and you can kind of just make it a little bit more mellow, right? So focusing on those things I think really goes a long way, especially for our youth athletes. We may think it's a 2-second thing, but for them, um, it's one of the things they might remember, and then in 10 years to be like, hey, I really appreciate what you did. And like the small things that we do, I think mean lot more for our youth athletes. Self-care and coping skills, huge for coaches, right? Take care of yourself. Uh, Coaching is very tough. A lot of pieces in coaching, a lot of hours, a lot of unsung heroes out there, right? You got to take care of yourself in order to serve others, right? It's okay to have a hobby outside of coaching, right? It is okay you don't have to feel guilty if you're not practicing 5 days a week in the summer, right? You got to do what's sometimes best for you in order to best serve your athletes. Because if you're beat up and not present and not physically there and mentally there, they're not going to get the best version of you, and they're probably not going to grow as much as if you were to take care of yourself and you're sharp and you're bringing energy into the room or energy into whatever you're doing, right? So I challenge you to really look to take care of yourself, not only physically but mentally. Doug Schwab had a great video the other day. I think it went pretty viral, like talking to his guys at the college level of him, the things that he does, hanging out with family and his hobbies, but also like engaging in counseling and therapy. And I think when you have a premier college coach who is a national champion and Olympian talking about like he's not too tough to go get some extra help and good can always be better, even and seeking out some professional help. So I think that speaks volume that if he can do it, a lot of others can do it, right? Utilizing your resources, extremely important, right? Sharing those resources with our athletes, I think it is critical as well. While they do have smartphones and they have a lot more access than we might have. Some of them might not have the resources. So I know within our program, we have a Google Classroom, and I have a section just for counseling community resources, right? For athletes who may need help but be scared to ask for it or feel ashamed to ask for it. It's just to document like, hey, if you're food insecure or you need extra clothes or someone's struggling at home, or these are some resources that you can look into yourself. It gives them a platform where they don't necessarily have to ask, but they can get it themselves. And then if they need some questions, it's an easy way to open that conversation, right? No kids likes to get out. And then knowing when to reach out and get support, right? This isn't meant to be like a psychotherapy presentation, right? But also stressing that especially for our middle school and high school age athletes, there is an increase in like self-harm and suicide ideations, like knowing where to send your athletes if they are struggling and the point of contact, right? Their school counselor, school psychologist, um, what is your policies and procedures if someone is really struggling, right? And they can find that in with you. I'm not telling you to try to act like a psychiatrist or psychologist, but if you got a kid struggling, who can you go to so that kid can get the help that they need? And then also on the flip side, making sure you're aware of your community resources if you yourself or someone around you is struggling. All right, super important to take care of ourselves physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Questions,
That's a
thumbs
good
up.
one. That's a good slide, TC. And selfishly, I think when we take care of this and help our guys take care of it, our team's going to get better. So we focused, everyone's going to have practice, everyone's going to lift, everyone's going to run. When you bring the kids in the office and you sit down and you talk to them and build those relationships and you go into this self-care and the coping and you give them tools like mindset coaches and dietitians and things like that, you're reaching them on a different level. They connect more with each other, and then they will perform better for you. So it's great to build them up, and we get return in that. We love wrestling and we want to win wrestling matches. So it all works together and it's really cool. I love that you're outlining it. This was a great slide.
Appreciate you, Coach. Good feedback. Thank you. Social wellness, building off of kind of what Coach Galani said, right? If we take the time to build relationships with our athletes and members of our community, right, I think that you're going to have more buying, and then there's more likely you're going to see success both on the wrestling mat and off, right? So building healthy and meaningful relationships and showing them what that looks like, right? Especially in a day and age where technology is really a big part of their lives, right? And taking the time to do team building activities both during the season and then in the off season, I think it is crucial. We try to do like a community service project once a year to not only like build, some team camaraderie, but also like give back to our community and show the importance of serving others and volunteerism. And I think they really get a lot out of it. I try not to make it too challenging, right? We do like a park cleanup, in one of our sending districts for a former wrestler from our high school who was killed in action in Iraq. And I think that connects like the meaning and the importance of service and volunteerism. We do like a toy drive, a coat drive. We've done different things throughout the year. We've done like a movie night, right? We're all meet up at a movie theater and just go watch a movie and hang out where they don't have to feel like the only way they are connected is through the grit and grind of practice and competition, right? But they see each other as like they hang out with each other outside of the room or outside of the season, right? And then also like taking care and managing your relationships, right? Like there's got to be a balance as a coach, right? You got to be just more than a wrestling coach, right? You are either a husband or a wife or a father or a brother, an uncle, what a friend, and making sure that you don't isolate yourself during those 3 to 5, 6 months, depending on what you coach, and you're taking time to still maintain those healthy relationships. Showing our athletes what it means to be like social, right? And how to communicate. I think modeling that for them is really important, especially this. All right. This is not necessarily social, right? They see social media and they think it's okay, but like having them put their phones away and having them have conversations and what that looks like is extremely important. Even yesterday we had a couple freshmen come in for open room. One of my upperclassmen just shook his hand and started drilling, and I like stopped him. I was like, introduce to yourself to someone if you don't know them, right? Like I found it wild that they would just shake hands, don't even know each other's name, and then just started getting right into rolling. Like taking the time to focus on some of those where we may think it's you know second nature, and they should already know that, but stressing the importance, especially for some of your shy kids. And I know that for certain coaches, like you may work in a public school setting where you have a really wide variety of student athletes, right? You may have some high level student athletes, some student athletes who are new to wrestling, some students who are really high achieving, and some who struggle academically and socially, and trying to build those skills up, because that room could look very different depending on where you coach. And then making sure that we take the time to share with our athletes that they're to be global citizens and try to give back and make the world a better place that they found it, and it's their responsibility um, as they become adults to be involved and give back in whatever endeavors they pursue. So I think that's super important, to strive to build those connections with their school, your community, not only just your programs. Um, I think when students are connected to their school and their community, research shows they're more likely to be successful academically, and I think it also translates on the wrestling mat. Good on social questions, comments. Cool. All right. Next up, intellectual wellness. Engage in activities that stimulate the mind. Um, I think focusing on coaches, like we're lifelong learners, right? I think it's really important to attend coaches clinics and be involved in things that can help us grow, both in the sport and outside of the sport. For most of our student athletes, K through all the way up to college, I think they kind of get that intellectual wellness piece met in school. But I think for those adults who, once they begin their professional career, right, like modeling not to be complacent and always striving to improve and learn, and not only necessarily in the technical, tactical um, areas, but also mindset, diet, and nutrition. There's a lot of areas where we can grow to best serve ourselves and also in turn serve our student athletes. Providing those resources to our athletes are really important as well. I know one thing that we do in our program, in our Google Classroom, I try to post some articles or some TED Talks or some books that would just be not only good for wrestling, but also just good for life and motivation and preparing them for adulthood. And then let them chew on it on their own if they're invested. And then our group of leaders, we're starting to kind of make it more mandated that they engage in certain things, certain books, certain TED Talks, certain presentations. I know there's a couple that are provided by USA Wrestling, and then also the National Federation for High School Sports also has some leadership courses strictly for some student athletes. Um, Critical thinking and decision making, right? Just modeling that. And also, I try to have them make some decisions. Like I ask our student athletes for their feedback. I hold them accountable. When we do like captains, I have them vote and fill out a survey and then why they're doing that and what they believe in. I think for some of that they get a lot of that in school, but also, sometimes at practice, like, hey, give a kid the ability to write a practice plan and have them help run it, like make them think outside of the box instead of just being like followers, but also help them become leaders in different ways, that they can give back. Build strong, solid intellectual and academic skills. I think that is usually built at that, but continue. And like I said, just be lifelong learners, right? The sport is evolving, the world is changing, right? And we have the responsibility to kind of keep up to date, to be informed, and also to help our student athletes be informed. All right. Questions about intellectual wellness? Cool. The next few, I'm not going to go as deep into them. However, if you would like to discuss it, I'll circle back at the end. I'm trying to be cognizant of the time for those who are on. I know some only have a short window. Some, for my New Jersey guys and girls, some are still in school. So my buddy just texted me like, school's out. I'll be in the meeting soon. So I will circle back at the end. All right. So environmental wellness is probably the one of the most challenging for coaches and student athletes, right? Just being aware of our surroundings, being cognizant how we impact the environment and how it affects us. Try to build and repair, minimize the harm and destruction to the environment, and then connecting nature, building other dimensions with. I think this one's probably the most challenging for wrestling coaches. I don't know necessarily if, other than recycling, being good community members and maybe engaging in team building that takes you outside of the wrestling room. Like sometimes we'll go on a run on a local hill or mount within our community, and it kind of gets us out of the gym, out of the wrestling room kind of space. But just also for some of your athletes, they may, lean towards this as they get older, depending on their professional careers or just their personal hobbies. But just be, like I said, being good citizens and being aware of the carbon trail that we leave, and then trying to just minimize any harm that we accidentally or intentionally can do. All right, spiritual wellness. Right, this is probably one of the bigger ones. Right, you kind of see it in some of the interviews. Looking into the purpose and meaning of life, like talking to your athletes and then ourselves, like we are more than coaches and they're more than wrestlers. Like, they need to be well-rounded people. Spirituality doesn't necessarily have to be religion, based on religion, right? It can be, the importance of certain people's faith or really what shaped them. However, not everybody has the same values or spiritual systems in place. But also, where I try to frame spiritual wellness is more like gratitude and expressing gratitude and just being grateful for the opportunities that we have to serve as coaches, the opportunities that some student athletes have to compete. Not everybody has that ability, right? There are some people who cannot go to college. There are some people physically cannot wrestle, right? So while there are going to be some times where you're frustrated or maybe you're getting beaten up, but you still have the opportunity to train, to compete, to be part of the sport, right. And so I think that is extremely important to hone on. Like, this is an opportunity. Not everybody has it, right? And for us, when we're frustrated as coaches, like when I look back at maybe the 17-year-old me, right, and what were my goals and dreams, and part of them were being where I am right now, right? So being super grateful that even through the tough times of coaching, like this is something that I asked for, that we chose to do, and finding like the good parts in it, even sometimes where it can be really tough as a coach. Morals, values, and ethics, right? I can share out. I wrote a article about character development through the sport of wrestling, right? Modeling like what are the standards and expectations for our student athletes? Like, what kind of people do we want them to become? What kind of leaders? What kind of husbands and wives, teachers, lawyers, construction workers, whatever it may be. What kind of people do we want to send into the world, and how are we sharing with them? being aware, um, of areas of growth and how we can challenge ourselves to improve. And I think that is something that we as coaches also need to take the time. Like, we're good at telling our athletes to write goals and look for ways that they can get better at wrestling or they can get their grades up. But we also have to self reflect. How can we improve as a person, as a coach, as a teacher, as a professional? Um, Gratitude, empathy, and connection, I think, are really what is the focus, right? So if it doesn't have to be necessarily faith based, but like those three things are what I kind of strive when we're working on wellness or holistic wellness in a spiritual aspect, especially depending on where you coach and the level that you coach, it may look different, right? Mind, body, and soul, right? We got to take care of all three. Good. All right. Vocational wellness, just preparing and engaging in work that provides them with purpose and meaning. Thoughtful and proactive approach to preparing for career planning, right? This for some, maybe like, hey, as a middle school coach, what's your dream job? What would you want to do? Compared to a high school student, like, hey, what are you starting to major in? Where would you want to go to school? How can we help you with this process compared to maybe Coach Galani at the college level, like utilizing your resources, right? Wrestlers in Business, the Alumni Association. How can we start preparing you for the workforce? Talking about the difference between a job and a career. My athletes are really guilty. Some of them think I'm just a wrestling coach. Like, they forget I have an actual job, right? And talking about the importance of, like, what is your career going to be, and then also having hobbies and passions, like to coach or run a side business or be involved in local politics or whatever that may, like, talk about the difference between career, and then maybe something that is outside that might not raise you money, right? But something that you do in addition to kind of that fulfills you and gives you meaning and purpose. Also, the difference between maybe a short term job, like, hey, working at this might not be something that you're going to want to do for your entire life. Like, do you see yourself wanting to do what your side job at 15 when you're 45? Skills, interests, right? Like, look to focus on the skills that wrestling build, and then how that you can translate those skills into your adult life, right? Like, I know Forbes has an article out there that wrestlers make the best employees, right? But why? Talk to them about what you has they learned through wrestling and how they were grown and developed. Why are you? Because you're tough, you're dependable, um, you're hardworking, right? Those are the traits, and then how you build them. And then, talk for us, right? I think it's really important just know that we are more than just coaches, right? I'm more than just a counselor, right? In the relationship with my job and the other parts of my life, like, I'm made up of a lot of different pieces, right? And modeling that with our athletes, like, it's important that they know um, that they're more than just wrestlers, and then wrestling will end at some point, right? You won't always, even for the best of them, right? At some point, you will retire from a sport, right? And then, fluidity, things will change, right? And that's okay. Um, and letting them know, like, hey, if it's okay, if you don't have it all locked down right now, that's fine, right? But we still have to be doing things to try to explore this instead of just staying stagnant. For little guys, this is going to be tough, right? For high school and college, but also for coaches, like, hey, reflecting, like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life, right? What am I going to do when I'm done coaching? How am I going to fill that time? I think that's really important for us to think about, because some of us might be in here for the long haul and see us doing it for 20, 30, 40 years, and others may start a family, and then they might have to take a step back. All right, things change, so you also, as coaches and wrestling leaders, like, have to explore your career, your interests, your passions, your hobbies, and how they may change over the years, right? I know the 22-year-old coach who's single with no kids, compared to the 40-year-old coach who has a wife and 3 kids. Life is going to look a little different, right? And being able to manage that, and also knowing that it's okay if certain things change over time. All right. And the last one, financial wellness. Um, for coaches, I'm not going to talk too much about it, right? However, I think the point that I want for our athletes is being cognizant and aware that some of our athletes may not have all of their basic needs met, right? And knowing the impact and how they can affect them, and then also looking in some of the community resources or ways that we can support some of those athletes where that if those basic needs aren't met, it could really impact their performance and just their physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Right. I think it's important that we talk to our athletes and about some financial skills and like, hey, what are you planning on doing, right? And appropriate to the age level for them, and also for coaches, like looking at like, hey, coaching doesn't necessarily make you a millionaire, right? So making sure we're taking care of ourselves, and talking to financial advisors and planning for our futures. And also knowing that like with health and wellness, if something happens, like, do you have a plan if you can no longer coach anymore? Right. And I know for some of you, they're like, probably not, right? Do you have a will? Do you have a DNR? Do you have life insurance? Do you have disability insurance outside of your job if something were to happen, right? And I think it's just really important that we reflect on these things, and then as we get older, we make sure that we take care of ourselves and put ourselves in a place that we are financially stable, and set for some long and short term goals, right? Because things can change at any moment, right? And I know as we get older, we maybe feel a little less invincible. And maybe, to the young coach who maybe is 21, that they've never even thought about life insurance or disability compared to, some of my elder statesmen in the group who have multiple, platforms or policies, right? That they're prepared for life. So just looking at that, and then also, um, just being knowledgeable to have these discussions if your athletes um, have any questions, comments, or concerns about them. Okay. All right, and then here is some resources, links, some articles. Like I said, like the University of Maryland has 8 dimensions of wellness. Ohio State has 9. Northwestern, I believe, has a few less. So if you really want like a deep dive and additional resources, articles, videos, or information about the different dimensions of wellness and how to implement them or bring them into your programs, or things that you can do, and the importance of them that you can share with your athletes, they are there. I'm more than glad to email them out and share them on the band app, this presentation, so you can click through it and reference it later. And then besides that, questions, comments, concerns. I appreciate everybody sitting here and joining me ramble for the past 40 minutes.
You did a great job. This is really cool. I think seeing wrestlers as a whole person, as a more of a holistic sense, rather than just like an athlete who is a robot and can go out and do what he does in the practice room, he can do that on the mat. Seeing that there's a whole bunch of different influences at play here is super important. One thing that I've been toying with lately is this idea of purpose, right? And that, like, to get through the hard moments, if you don't have purpose, that thought of like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? What am I doing? Why am I doing this sprint? That'll haunt you and like get you really down. And that'll kind of flow into all the other areas of wellness. But that finding purpose, like the idea of like we have to find it, is a big heavy thing. Like, what's the meaning of my life? That could also put a lot of stress on us and the kids. And I've been toying with this idea that like the meaning of life could be whatever you want. You just got to choose. You choose it, right? You make the meaning. You decide what it is. So just pick something, for lack of a better, like, more time to explain it, but just like pick something and then make that the meaning of your practice. Make that the meaning, just so like you could have something to fall back on, and it evolves over time. That's just something that I've been kind of like toying with as I think through like the mindset of difficult situations in wrestling in particular.
And I think that's a real struggle with coaches and Athletes, like part of our identity is like we wrestle, right? We are wrestlers, we are coaches, right? And so like for some high school or college, like when that part of their identity is ending, like what's next, right? Um, and for some of them, they really struggle with that, right? So knowing that, like, hey, we are more than just a wrestler, and what is like, we have a lot of different puzzle pieces that make us is really important for those who are not going to continue. Or how do I transition from, even there's just the transition from college into the workforce for some is very tough, right? So um, definitely, like, and our purpose over the time changes, right? Like my purpose as a high school kid compared to my purpose as a 34-year-old coach and counselor compared to, someone's purpose when they become a father or a mother, right? It will change. So it is pretty fluid, and just finding like ways to explore that I think is really important as well.
Very cool. I think this is the right direction of like where the future of coaching kind of is.
Yeah, I think it's more so nowadays, as we get older, coaches, not so much when you're fresh out of college and you really just want to get all of that knowledge of the technical aspect and the hard work to the kids and get them to try to be the best wrestler. I think kind of taking a step back and realizing that it's more of a mentorship than it is you being a coach. And when you find yourself connecting different core values and visions of where it could be in your workplace. It could be a part of an organization or an association that you're affiliated with, and just kind of taking those different mentalities and teaching these kids like and mentoring them, not just coaching them to be better wrestlers, but like taking on that role of like I'm not just your coach. And I feel as though like when I was a kid and I looked at some of my coaches, like I kind of just saw them that way. And yeah, they told me like if anything ever were to happen to give them a call, but I never really took them up on that type of thing. Where it's like a few things that I've been kind of implementing is, getting my kids into hobbies outside of just being a competitor, where it's like, hey, like pick up golf, pick up fishing, pick up hunting, pick up something that you want to do when you're not having this commitment of being the best athlete. And bringing them out. Like I brought a few of my wrestlers out to golf, whether they're trash or not, it's irrelevant. It's getting them into just, hey, I'm not a friend, but I'm also not just your wrestling coach. I'm here to help guide you to become a young man. And I feel as though we see that a lot more with the development through USA Wrestling nowadays, where there is a more of a commitment to that development and that mentorship, more so than just creating good wrestlers. And I thought this was I came in a little bit towards a quarter of a way in, but great work. Thank you.
Nice, coach. I do think that's really important, right? Like I think as my coaching career has developed, right? Like early on, you want to win and you want to compete, and you're fresh out, and then as you get older, like I think that um, building good people is really important, and then seeing their success, in life is probably more meaningful for me than maybe some of their success on the wrestling mats, right? Like if they were great wrestlers but they struggle after life, I feel like I may have let them down, right? But I have some of my kids who may have not been the best wrestlers, but what they did in the process to try to become a good one, and then now who they are as human beings and as people, as leaders and fathers, I think that is just more meaningful to me now. So I think if I had to talk to a younger version of myself, that would definitely be like, hey, focus on the process and building them up. The wins will come. Like if they are good people and do things the right way, they're more likely to win on a wrestling mat too. So it's like it's a win-win kind of situation. And I like the point that you brought up, like them seeing you as people rather than just a coach, right? Like I know I try to go to a school play once a year, right? So they don't just see like the tough wrestling coach who I try to go to like either the musical or the fall play, just so and bring a couple, like do a couple events like that are outside of their comfort zone, that show them different things that are not just like athletic type things, but like be a little bit more well-rounded. It's cool to go to a play. You can go to a museum, whatever it may be. So, Chris Lombardi, great seeing you. Thank you for joining us, brother. Hope to see you at camp or at some point this summer. If not, I will see you next season. Anybody else? Questions, comments, feedbacks? If you missed anything and want me to circle back, be more than glad. If you want to do more of a deep dive, I know some may have some other work commitments.
Coach Tripp, I think Coach Tripp has a question. Go ahead, Coach.
Thank you. I keep hearing everyone say the best wrestler, when I think what you mean is wrestle the best, okay? Because you're saying the best wrestler, and to me, the best wrestler would be the person who might be the loser for the all 4 years, but continues to come back and always shakes people's hands and always helps people up. To me, that would be the best wrestler. So, are you looking for the best wrestler, or are you looking for who wrestles the best? Just something to think about.
I think both. I would agree. I think both, Coach. I want them to be competitive, but also be great sports. I don't think I intend to match them hand in hand, if that makes sense, right? Like I think it's more process based. The outcome is, I've seen some really good wrestlers lose, right? Um, and I've seen some that's more just the outcome based, but like how they prepare and how they conduct themselves and how they deal with adversity and how they compete, I think is more important to me than just the scoreboard. Um, but yeah, for how we frame like what is a good wrestler, I think a lot of time we think of the technical and tactical, right? The competitive piece, right? But um, being a good person and being a good wrestler are kind of intermeshed and intertwined, or that's at least the goal we want to make both. I definitely agree with that. I got Danny Hughes on the line. Oh man, I got a couple people. Sorry, gang. I'm just getting to the screen. When I present, I can only see I can't really see anybody. I can only see like the slides.
Hey, buddy.
See faces. I got Coach Nestor, Coach Tripp, Columbus. Sweet. I thought I was really just talking to myself for a little bit. I knew Clayton was on. I couldn't see who else was on the call.
Now you ended up with over a dozen. It was good. Good.
Yeah. Sweet. Coach Tripp, thanks for that. Anybody else got anything? Coach Clayton, you have anything?
I'm good on this end. Thanks so much. Just having the opportunity to work with coaches going through this certification process and to learn, what our wrestling community thinks and feels, and then to watch a bunch of coaches jump on in support of that to learn and share. It's the best part of what we do in our coach education program. So Tommy, thanks for all of the effort you've put into your process. I know we're 2 tasks now from finishing gold. So it's pretty much all there. So thanks so much for your efforts and great group. Thank you. And I'll let you wrap up whenever you're ready.
Sweet. All right, guys. So I am actually going to link this presentation into the chat, right? So if you want to copy it and open it into a browser, also, if you want to drop your email, if you want me to email it to you, I could be more than glad. I appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day to join us for this presentation. Like Coach Clayton said, this is one of the gold level tasks for coaches, right? So it's been a 10+ year journey. I think I'm not one of the last, but I remember starting it when the bronze coaching certification program was still in person with Roger Reyna and Brian Dolph at the University of Pennsylvania in a conference room with, a packet and like 4 sections of wrestling mat. And we were, watching videos and taking notes and actually demonstrating stuff and then seeing how it's evolved. And getting up to this point has been great. So I appreciate all that you do for the National Coaches Education Program and all the coaches here do for your athletes. If you ever need anything, just give me a shout. I see a couple people asking for permission, so I'm going to change the permission settings on this document. so you can all access it, and then and I'll stick around if anybody has, I know some people are not, um, I like to ask questions at the end. I don't like to be that guy where like there's 50 people still standing, got to get out of here. So I'll stick around for a couple more minutes if anybody wants to deep dive into anything, or just talk about coaching life, whatever it may be. If not, I think we're good on my end, Coach.
Awesome. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining us.